Have you noticed how truly elegant people talk very little about money? It is no coincidence. Silent luxury never announces itself. It simply exists. Last week, I visited the home of a woman considered the most sophisticated in New York. What impressed me was not what she had, but what she chose not to have. Her apartment in the Upper East Side contained few objects, but each one told a story, a silent economy that never needed to declare itself. If you are watching this video while enjoying tea, perhaps in a cup saved for special occasions, know that we already share a certain complicity, because we both understand there is a difference between saving and living with elegance, and that difference is not in the price of things, but in the intention behind each choice. If you have not yet subscribed to the Minimalist Charm channel, this is the perfect moment. Press the button, activate the bell, and leave your like so that more women discover that it is possible to live with less, and yet, with much more refinement. The content I share here is not for those who simply seek to save money, but for those who wish for each dollar to tell a more beautiful story. Last week, while organizing my winter closet, I found a coat purchased 3 seasons ago, a considerable investment at the time. It cost the equivalent of 3 dinners at expensive Manhattan restaurants. But the price per use? Cents. It is that coat I would wear to go to the MoMA, for coffee in the West Village, or for a stroll through Central Park on an autumn Sunday. True luxury is not in the label, but in the silent mathematics that few understand. 1. The seasonal renewal ritual. The first habit is perhaps the most transformative because it goes beyond the act of saving. It completely recalibrates our relationship with what we own. With each change of season, I review everything I have, not just clothes, but every object. In the house, every commitment, every recurring expense. This ritual has deep roots in Japanese culture, specifically in the concept of danshari, the deep cleaning that prepares the space for new energies. My grandmother Akiko would begin this practice in the early days of spring in Kyoto, cleaning every corner of the house, not just physically, but energetically. I adopted this tradition with a financial focus, and the impact was profound. Every 3 months, I reserve a Sunday morning, generally the first of the new quarter, for a complete review. With a bowl of bancha tea and without digital distractions, I ask 3 essential questions for each item: subscription or financial commitment. I ask for each item: does this still fulfill its purpose? Has it brought joy or utility in the last 6 months? If I did not have this today, would I buy it again? The practice goes beyond physical cleaning. It is a constant curation, an active meditation on what truly matters. There is a Japanese concept called tokimeku, the sensation of joy that something awakens when we touch it. If an object does not evoke that response, perhaps it is time to thank it and release it. Last spring, I realized I was keeping a collection of special plates for visitors that I rarely used. They occupied an entire cabinet and required regular cleaning. I decided that if they were too good for daily use, perhaps they were not good enough to occupy space in my life. I kept only what I use and appreciate daily. During one of these reviews, I discovered I was paying for 3 streaming services that I barely used, a waste of nearly $50 monthly. In a year, that adds up to $600, enough for a traditional Japanese ceramics workshop I always wanted to take. This constant practice not only frees up physical space, but also prevents redundant purchases. How many times have you bought something only to discover you already had something similar hidden in a drawer? Or subscribed to a service you already have on another platform? An architect friend adopted this ritual after our conversation and discovered she owned 7 black coats that were slightly different. She decided to keep the 2 best ones and donate the others. With the money saved on unnecessary purchases, she financed a specialization course she had wanted for years. The constant cycle of review creates a life where each object has purpose and meaning. And curiously, the more conscious I am of what I already have, the less I desire to acquire new things. My grandmother Akiko called this the paradox of abundance. When we value what we possess, we feel less need to accumulate more. 2. The cost per use rule. Last autumn, I was invited to a brunch at a celebrity home in Beverly Hills. During the tour of her apartment, she proudly showed me her closet, a space the size of a small Manhattan apartment. Among her hundreds of pieces, I noticed a disturbing pattern, dozens still with tags. I bought it in Italy 2 years ago, she explained, about an outfit never worn. When I visit the homes of certain friends, especially those with full closets and empty bank accounts, I notice this same pattern, expensive objects that, ironically, seem cheap due to their lack of purpose and use. True sophistication is not in having much, but in using well what you have. The second habit that transformed my relationship with money was calculating the real cost of each item before buying it. A $400 dress used 100 times costs $4 per use. Less than a coffee in New York. A $2,000 bag used daily for 5 years. Less than $1.50 per day. A bargain from the sales that never leaves the closet. An infinite waste, no matter how much you saved at the moment of purchase. I had a client, an executive at a technology company, who spent fortunes on designer clothes but never seemed to have anything to wear. When I applied this concept to her wardrobe, we discovered pieces worth $3,000 that, divided by the number of uses, cost $750 per use. A questionable investment even for her generous budget. It is not about how much you spend, but how much value each dollar brings to your life. My grandfather Takeshi, who survived World War II in Japan, taught me, if it is not worth buying twice, it is not worth buying even once. A lesson about value that Harvard economists should teach in the first semester. 3. The expense notebook. That no one sees. I have a confession that might seem antiquated in this digital era. I keep a small Japanese notebook, bound in washi paper, where I record every cent I spend. Not for lack of resources, but out of respect for what I have. This ritual, which I inherited from my grandfather Takeshi, a disciplined man who survived 3 economic crises, completely transformed my relationship with money. In January, I decided to experiment with this practice for 30 days. At the end of the first month, I was surprised to discover that I was spending almost $500 on small coffees and snacks that I barely remembered consuming. Invisible money that evaporated without leaving significant memories. At the last spring gala at the MoMA, a socialite known for her excesses commented on my dress. "Naomi, is this new? I have never seen you with it." I smiled and replied, "Actually, this dress has already paid for its investment. It is its 15th appearance." She laughed, uncomfortable. A week later, she called me discreetly asking me to explain this notebook thing. 3 months later, she sent me a message saying she had saved enough for a trip to Tokyo just by tracking her invisible expenses. The secret is not in recording expenses, but in transforming numbers into narrative. Each page tells a story about my choices, my values, what I consider essential. It is not about deprivation. Last week, I spent $300 on a dinner with a dear friend I had not seen in years. It was recorded with joy in the notebook, since every dollar brought real value to my life. And no, it does not have to be a Japanese notebook. It can be an application, a spreadsheet, even a simple notepad. I have friends who use physical envelopes, with money for each spending category, a traditional method called the envelope system or kakeibo, as my grandmother Akiko practiced. The important thing is the awareness that comes with the act of recording. Wealth begins not in earning more, but in paying attention to what already flows through our hands. 4. The art of hosting at home. In 2018, when I lived in Tokyo, I was surprised when analyzing my bank statements. I was spending almost 40% of my available income on dinners and brunches at restaurants. Not for the pleasure of the food itself, I often did not even remember what I had eaten, but for the social connection. That is when I rediscovered a tradition that my mother always valued, the art of hosting at home. So, I began to invite friends home regularly. At first, I confess there was some nervousness, the pressure to impress, to have everything perfect, but I soon discovered something fascinating. People connect more deeply in intimate environments than in noisy restaurants. A dinner for 6 people at a good New York restaurant easily reaches $800. The same dinner, prepared at home with quality ingredients from Whole Foods, $200. The difference? $600, and incomparably more intimate memories. And no, you do not need to be a professional chef. I discovered that my most memorable dinners were precisely the simplest ones. A well-prepared salmon, a fresh salad, good bread, artisanal cheese, and a bottle of good wine. Speaking of wine, here is a practical tip. Keep some good bottles at home. They cost half the price you would pay at restaurants and eliminate the need for impulsive outings when the desire to celebrate something arises. A Manhattan client recently confessed to me that she never hosted at home because she did not have a table large enough for dining. See how we create imaginary barriers to maintain expensive habits? I replied that the most memorable dinners of my life happened around small tables, even sitting on the floor on cushions, Japanese style. In Kyoto, I participated in a dinner where 8 people shared a meal sitting on zabuton, in a space smaller than many New York closets. Luxury is in the company, not in the furniture. Last week, I hosted 4 friends for afternoon tea. I served in white porcelains that I inherited from my grandmother. We used linen napkins that I ironed myself, and the cake was made by me in the morning. A simple matcha cake recipe that I learned from my mother. The cost? Less than $40. For an entire afternoon of meaningful conversations. The elegance? Incomparable. One of them, a financial market executive, commented that it was the most relaxing moment of the week. True luxury today is not material. It is temporal. 5. The waiting period for the wish list. In a culture of buy now, pay later, this 5th habit seems almost subversive. The waiting period for the wish list. The concept eliminated about 80% of my impulsive purchases and saved thousands of dollars over the years. For any non-essential article above $100, I impose a minimum waiting period of 30 days. It is not just a rule, but a ritual. I note the desired item in a specific notebook, along with the date, the price, and, this is crucial, why I want it at that moment. This last detail frequently reveals motives that have nothing to do with the object itself. Sometimes it is stress, social competition, or a momentary void I am trying to fill with things. Last October, after a particularly stressful week, I browsed online and found a bag that seemed perfect to me. It cost $900. An investment, I told myself. Instead of clicking buy, I noted it in my wish list. When I revisited the note 30 days later, I read my justification. I need something special to feel better after a difficult week. The emotional need had already passed, and the bag no longer seemed so irresistible. When I was renovating my apartment, I saw a table lamp that I loved. It was perfect for my office, or so I thought at the moment. It cost $520, a considerable price, but justifiable for the quality, I tried to convince myself. I wrote it in my waiting list, along with the thought, it will make my office more sophisticated. 3 weeks later, visiting a small gallery in Soho, I found a vintage lamp from the 50s, signed by a little-known designer. It cost $210 and had a story, something the first one did not offer. If I had bought on impulse, I would have lost the opportunity to find something with much more meaning and would still save $310. More importantly, the first lamp was just an object. The second, a connection with the history of design that I love. The curious thing is that about 70% of the items I note simply lose their appeal after a few weeks. The desire evaporates, leaving only gratitude for having waited. It is as if something magical happened in those 30 days. The urgency disappears and clarity emerges. An interior designer I met at an event confessed that she adopted this practice with her clients. Before ordering expensive pieces, we create a waiting list. 3 out of 5 items are eliminated after the reflection period, saving tens of thousands on each project. Patience, this ancient virtue, may be the most profitable financial habit there is. 6. The capsule wardrobe system. During my years in Tokyo, I learned about the capsule wardrobe, a concept that revolutionized not only my closet, but my relationship with fashion consumption. The idea was born in post-war Japan, when resources were scarce, and each piece needed to be versatile and durable. Today, it has become my silent way of saving without ever looking economical. At the last gala event I attended in New York, an acquaintance commented that I was always impeccably dressed. What she did not know is that my black silk dress cost one-third of what she probably spent that night. The difference? I invested in a classic and timeless model 4 years ago, which has accompanied me to dozens of events, always with different accessories. Last January, I dined with a stylist friend who commented on my repeated clothing. I replied that I do not repeat clothes. I create different combinations with carefully selected pieces. It is the difference between having a limited vocabulary of expensive words or a broad vocabulary with well-chosen words, I explained. The difference seems subtle, but the impact on the budget is extraordinary. A recent study showed that the average American woman regularly uses only 20% of her wardrobe. This means that 80% of the investment in clothes is practically inactive, a waste of both money and physical and mental space. I have fewer than 50 pieces in my wardrobe, excluding underwear and sportswear. Each piece combines with at least 3 others. Each piece has enough quality to last years. I prefer a pure merino wool that will cost more but will last a decade, to 5 synthetic blouses that will lose their shape in 1 season. Each color complements my personal palette. Neutral tones, black, navy blue, cream, camel, and some touches of color that I know will favor my skin tone for years, regardless of passing trends. The result? I spend approximately 70% less on clothes than the average American woman in my social circle, but I rarely use the same combination twice. And I never wake up with the feeling of having nothing to wear, the most expensive of poverties. An executive friend calculated that she spends about 15 minutes daily deciding what to wear. That adds up to almost 2 entire days per year. This habit not only saves money but also time and mental energy daily. The morning decision takes seconds, not precious minutes. When you have only pieces that you love, that combine with each other and that really fit you well, each choice is correct. It is a form of automation for life that does not require technology, just intentionality. American designer Michael Kors, known for his elegant and minimalist looks, is rarely seen with more than a few well-chosen outfits. As he once said, elegance is not in being noticed, it is in being remembered. Our wardrobe should reflect this. Philosophy. 7. The rule of 3 alternatives before buying. Silent sophistication does not come from impulsivity, but from deliberate choice. In today's world, where everything is a click away, this habit has become my safeguard against hasty financial decisions. In 2019, while visiting an antique market in New York, I found a vintage kimono from the 30s with handmade silk embroidery. It was impressive, the kind of piece that makes your heart beat faster. It cost the equivalent of $1,200, a considerable amount even for such a special item. My first impulse was to buy it immediately, fearing that someone else would take it. But instead, I took a deep breath and applied the rule of 3 alternatives. The rule is simple but revolutionary. Before buying anything significant, find 3 alternatives. Compare not only the price, but the quality, durability, provenance, and, most importantly, how much each option really resonates with your current life, not with the life you imagine having on social media. This practice has roots in traditional Japanese wisdom that values contemplation of multiple perspectives before acting. It is not just about saving, but about honoring each acquisition with due reflection. For the kimono, my search for alternatives was enlightening. I found a less authentic modern version for $400 at a boutique in Chelsea, a vintage version similar to the original for $800 at a lesser-known antiquarian, and a third option that I would never have considered. Initially, a 4-week course taught by a master of Japanese textile tradition, which included materials to create my own contemporary piece inspired by the classics. I chose the course after a week of reflection. It cost $550, less than half of the original kimono, and resulted not only in a unique piece that I still wear today on special occasions, but in knowledge that I carry forever and friendships with other women who share this interest. A saving of $650 and an incalculable gain in meaning and connection. A friend who adopted this practice recently bought a sofa. Instead of choosing the first model that enchanted her, for $4,200, she found three alternatives. The third option was from an emerging designer who created custom pieces. For $3,800, she obtained a sofa customized for her space, supported a local artist, and saved $400. This rule works for almost everything: furniture, electronics, even experiences like travels and courses. There are always alternatives, and the best of them is frequently not the most obvious. Over time, I realized that this rule not only saves money, but also protects me from consumerism, manipulated by algorithms that know our impulses better than we do ourselves. As my grandfather Takeshi used to say, hasty decisions are rarely the best. In today's accelerated world, pausing to consider alternatives is almost a revolutionary act. A marketing executive with whom I worked reported that she saved more than $15,000 in 1 year just by applying this rule for purchases above $250. More importantly, she reported being much more satisfied with her acquisitions. Each one had passed through the filter of genuine reflection, not just momentary impulse. Sophisticated minimalism is not about renunciation, but about conscious choice. It is not about saving out of necessity, but from elegance of spirit. It is the difference between austerity born of scarcity and simplicity that comes from inner abundance. I recently met an executive from a major investment bank who, despite her six-figure salary, was constantly in debt. Her Manhattan home was full of expensive objects, but lacked that sense of peace that only space, physical and mental, can provide. After implementing just 3 of these habits, she not only balanced her finances, but reported feeling richer than ever, even while spending significantly less. These 7 habits are not about deprivation. They are about liberation, the freedom to choose consciously, to own with intention, to spend aligned with your deepest values. For me, they allowed building a life where each object, each experience, each dollar spent has a clear purpose or brings genuine beauty. Because in the end, the greatest saving is not of money, but of attention. By freeing yourself from excess, you create space for what truly matters: meaningful relationships, memorable experiences, personal growth. As my grandmother Akiko used to say, the most important objects in life are not things. Once, a journalist asked me what my greatest luxury was. He expected me to mention my art collection or some exclusive design piece. I replied that my greatest luxury was time, to contemplate, to create, to connect. And these habits provide me exactly that: more time, more space, more freedom to live with intention. If this video brought you any value, leave your like and subscribe to the Minimalist Charm channel. Each new subscriber is a reminder that there is a growing community of people seeking a more conscious and elegant way to live, with less, but better. Share with someone who could benefit from this perspective of elegant and intentional economy. As a community, we can redefine what it means to live well, not by the quantity we accumulate, but by the quality of the choices we make. And in the comments, leave the phrase, "Less is freedom." If this message resonates with you, know that you have found your place. A place where saving is not a sacrifice, but a way to honor what truly matters. Until soon, and remember, true sophistication never needs to shout to be noticed. It whispers, and only the attentive perceive it.